Praise the Lord, everybody. Tonight we're going to start some lessons on fasting. And I know that I've had quite a few questions about fasting. And we are getting near April, which is when we will be having our communion and foot washing. And fasting is an important part of that. If you turn with me to the book of Matthew chapter 9 and verse 15. We'll just start off with one verse, just verse 15. And Jesus said unto them, Can the children of the bride chamber mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and then shall they fast. And he uses an interesting word here at the very beginning, which is mourn. Can the children of the bride chamber mourn? The word mourn means to express grief or sorrow. It means to cry. And so today we are more familiar with mourning after the death of a loved one. And you can tell when a person is mourning. There are some emotions that we have that are very hard to hide. Sorrow, grief, joy, those are very difficult emotions to hide. When a person is happy, everybody can tell. They walk different. They talk different. Their facial expressions are different. You can tell when someone's happy. You can also tell when someone is hurt and they're mourning. It's not always over the loss of a loved one. Sometimes we make foolish decisions in our life that change the direction of our life forever. I was watching a documentary on con men, and there were people who had worked 30, 40 years saving their money up, investing their money, just to find out when it was time for them to retire that the person that they trusted with their money stole it all. How do you recover from that? You can't go back to work and make the kind of money you used to make. Those are the kind of things that cause people to mourn. Foolish decisions. And let me just say this, as far as foolish decisions are concerned. Can the saints be tricked? If we're not careful, we can be tricked too. And one of the things that will get us tricked, is by making the same mistake that people in the world make. When you think something is too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. If someone is offering you something extraordinary, more than likely, you're being tricked. I get criticized for this by some of my friends, but I have a healthy dose of skepticism. I don't believe a lot of stuff. I just don't. Some things sound too incredible to believe. I was doing some research on evolution, and Evolution is just too incredible to believe that somehow rocks, and I heard an evolutionist talking about this. He said, rocks, that's the key to life. I'm lost over things like that. That's too incredible to believe. So if we're not careful, if we aren't in some ways a little bit like Thomas, we'll get tricked too. I don't have a lot of doubt when it comes to the things of the Bible, but I got a whole lot of doubt when it comes to the things of this life. A whole bunch of it is wrong. Now, most of the time when we think about mourning, we think about it in terms of America, the United States, our families, our culture. But when the Bible is talking about it, you're talking about ancient Eastern culture. They had a different way of mourning than we do. Their way of mourning was, you could tell by 3 different ways: weeping, loud lamentation, and ripping of your clothes. And as far as ripping your clothes is concerned, oftentimes they would use ashes or dust and throw it on their head. That was symbolic of them mourning. So let's go back and look at it. Genesis chapter 21, verses 14 through 16. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder. And the child, now the child he's talking about is Abraham's child that he had by Hagar, Ishmael. And now he's kicking her out. Why is Abraham doing this? God told him to. Wife did. Anybody else? Yeah, he said God told him to obey his wife. That's exactly what it was. This young man's role had been played. How many years were the children of Israel afflicted by Egypt, the Egyptians? Does anybody know? 5 years. 400 years. She said she started to say 500. It was 400 years. And yet they were only in Egypt 240 years. So how did we come up with 400? That's right. Hagar was an Egyptian. And her son, Ishmael, was ridiculing Isaac. So that started the affliction of the Egyptians on Israel. 400 years later, they come up out of Egypt. 400 years after this young man was teasing Isaac. But now, let's finish. He sent her away, and she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba, and the water was spent in the bottle, or the water was empty, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. So she has run out of water. And how long can you live in the desert without water? Somebody said 3 days. In the desert. If you are foolish, you can die in the desert without water in 12 hours. You get to running, you get to moving around and doing work, you will dehydrate yourself, and you will die in 12 hours. Less than a half a day, you can be dead. If you are careful and you only do what you need to do at night and you don't exert yourself, you can last 3 days. But a desert, that's a bad place to be without water. Abraham gave her water and sent her on her way in the desert. When the water is empty, who wants to sit and watch their child die? Verse 16, and she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot. So she was a long distance off. And this is why. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. I don't want to see my child die. And she sat over against him. Now, I know it says that she sat over against him, but now she's not. It doesn't mean that she was sitting right next to him. She was sitting ways off with her back to him so she wouldn't see him. And then she lifted up her voice and wept. Now, we know what crying is, don't we? But we cry kind of quiet. Sometimes you can't tell a person who's crying if you're behind them or if they're in front of you unless you see this. And you know, oh, something ain't right. They're either laughing or they're crying. They're real quiet. But that's not a part of their culture. She lifted up her voice. Now, remember I said if you exert yourself, you'll die quicker?